faithfully convey value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. Today we're exploring the book Reason for Hope. The subtitle is A Spiritual Journey by Goodall. This is the autobiography of renowned British ethologist and anthropologist Dr. Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall, also translated as Jane Goodall in Chinese contexts. She spent decades in the African jungle studying chimpanzees, knowing everything about them. In her public talks, she always greets audiences in chimpanzee calls. She was also the first to discover chimps use and modify tools. This groundbreaking discovery shattered the belief that only humans use tools, making us rethink what truly makes us human. Goodall's been called the Mother Teresa of animal conservation. For her chimpanzee research and environmental advocacy, she was named a Dame of the British Empire and UN Messenger of Peace. Today's book, Reason for Hope, is Goodall's reflection and summation of her life journey. First published in 1999 with 17 chapters, Goodall recounts her birth, heartfelt, wild interactions with chimps, and candidly examines humanity's future. The Washington Post praised, "I'm in awe when Goodall describes her scientific work and sincere efforts to better our world." Now, I'll guide you through Goodall's life in 3 parts. Her early years, chimpanzee research, and environmental education. First, her early life. Jane Goodall, born in 1934 London, to a Christian family, her father a businessman, mother Van, a novelist. As the eldest daughter with a younger sister, she adored nature and animals since childhood. At age 1, her father gifted her a stuffed gorilla toy named Jubilee after the first gorilla born at London Zoo. Mother's friends feared it would scare young Jane, but she instantly cherished Jubilee, carrying it everywhere. To this day, Jubilee remains in Goodall's English home. At 18 months, little Jane brought garden earthworms to her bed, wanting to sleep with them. At age 4, Goodall visited her grandmother's farm and became deeply fascinated by the hens laying eggs. She wondered where on the hen was such a big hole that could lay eggs. To uncover the truth, little Goodall crawled into the hen house and waited motionlessly for 4 hours, finally witnessing a hen lay an egg. Overjoyed, she ran home only to find it dark, and her family had panicked and called the police. And, seeing her excited daughter return, her mother didn't scold her, but patiently listened to the story. In the years that followed, her mother remained her strongest pillar of support. She encouraged Goodall to chase her interests and, more importantly, told her to believe in herself. In September 1939, when Goodall was 5 and a half, Britain declared war on Germany. Her father joined the army, while her mother took Goodall and her sister to live with their grandmother. But then, their grandmother's home was in Bournemouth, southwest England, near the English Channel. Later, Goodall's parents divorced, and she stayed at her grandmother's until adulthood. Her grandmother was a strong-willed, disciplined woman who ran the household impeccably. Her grandfather died young, leaving behind thousands of books. As a young girl, Goodall loved reading and was passionate about literature, poetry, the Bible, philosophy, and biological sciences. One of her favorite books was the Tarzan series by American author Edgar Rice Burroughs. The protagonist Tarzan's parents were killed by wild beasts, and he was raised by apes in the African jungle. Goodall was enchanted by the idyllic jungle life in the books, foreshadowing her future research on African wildlife. After high school, unable to afford college, 19-year-old Goodall followed her mother's advice to train as a secretary in London, because secretaries could find jobs anywhere in the world, including Africa. After graduating, after that she worked as a secretary and also selected music for a film studio. On December 18, 1956, a letter from her friend Chloe changed Goodall's life. Chloe's parents had bought a farm in Kenya and invited Goodall to visit. To go to Africa, she first needed to raise money. The day she received the letter, Goodall quit her job and returned to her grandmother's home in Bournemouth. Good for saving on rent. He then worked as a waiter in a restaurant for 5 months, saving every penny of his wages and tips without spending a dime frivolously. Finally, at 23, he saved enough for the fare and boarded a passenger ship to Kenya alone. In Kenya, Goodall first stayed at Clothes Farm for a few weeks, then found a secretary job in Nairobi. People noticed Goodall's love for animals. One day, someone told Goodall, "If you're interested in animals, you should go find Louis Leakey." Leakey was born in 1903, a famous Kenyan paleoanthropologist and archaeologist who proved that humans originated in Africa. With her knowledge of Africa and animals, Goodall passed the interview and got a job at the museum where Leakey worked. Shortly after, she followed the Leakeys to the Olduvai Gorge in Tanganyika for archaeological excavations to find fossils of human ancestors. At the end of 3 months of excavations, Leakey talked to Goodall about chimpanzees and gorillas. He believed that understanding the behavior of these close human relatives in the wild could help infer the behavior of human ancestors. Leakey's idea seems commonplace today, but at the time, it was groundbreaking. Leakey told Goodall that near Lake Tanganyika's eastern mountains, people had found traces of chimpanzee activity, and he hoped to study them, but the work would be very challenging. No. First, there was no money, though they could draw on previous research. Second, the mountains were remote, with rugged terrain and dangerous animals roaming around. Goodall thought to herself, what kind of scientist could accomplish such a task? Definitely not someone like her without a university degree. But Leakey didn't want a professionally trained researcher. He wanted someone open-minded, curious, animal-loving, and extremely patient. Someone who could break free from traditional scientific theories and, more importantly, spend years away from civilization, observing and studying chimpanzees in the jungle, and Goodall was his ideal candidate. In 1958, Leakey sent Goodall back to London to learn about primates while he worked on raising research funds. It wasn't easy. People thought Leakey must be out of his mind. Why let an untrained young woman do such risky research? But Leakey remained unmoved. Finally, he secured seed funding from an American businessman, covering Goodall's expenses for 6 months in the field. But according to Tanganyikan authorities' requirement, as a young woman, Goodall had to bring a European companion for safety. Who could be more suitable than her mother? In July 1960, Goodall and her mother Van arrived at the Gombe Stream Game Reserve. Our interpretation now moves into part 2. Goodall's chimpanzee research in the 1960s and 70s took place in Gombe, located in western Tanzania, which became a national park in 1966. Goodall and her mother set up camp in pitched tents in the southern region of Gombe. Accompanying them were also a cook, a forest game warden, and a local guide. Everyone thought these two eccentric British women would give up within weeks, but they were all wrong.
Actually, at first, Goodall was very anxious. Although she gradually got familiar with Gombe's natural environment, the chimpanzees here were afraid of humans and ran away at the sight of her. She didn't know how long it would take for them to get used to her presence.
If the funds ran out and she achieved nothing, Leakey wouldn't be able to raise more money. Worse still, 6 weeks after arriving in Gombe, she and her mother contracted malaria, suffering from high fevers and chills. As soon as Goodall recovered a bit, she eagerly went out to search for chimpanzees. One early morning, she climbed the slope opposite the tent and discovered a protruding rock. Goodall named this rock the Peak. Located on a ridge, it was an excellent vantage point, offering views of her camp and the Kasakala Valley to the north. She discovered the peak in the Kasakala Valley. For Goodall, it was a turning point. That day, she spotted chimpanzees in the valley below, eating figs. After watching them disappear through binoculars, she woke up at 5:30 every morning, had breakfast, and climbed the peak before dawn to observe the chimpanzees. Sometimes she had to wait for hours to see a chimpanzee, and during this time, the key was to stay focused. Because chimpanzees often move in small groups or alone, silently. Gradually, Goodall gained insights into the chimpanzee's lifestyle, and they became less wary of her. Goodall's first valuable discovery came 3 months after arriving at Gombe. That morning, she climbed up and down 3 valleys without spotting a single chimpanzee. At noon, exhausted and surprised tone, she suddenly saw a dark figure dart through the grass ahead and recognized an adult male chimpanzee. Because it had white hair on its chin, Goodall named him David Graybeard. She saw David Graybeard sitting on a termite mound, inserting a grass blade into a hole, periodically pulling it out to lick, then breaking another blade to use. Clearly, David was using tools to fish termites out for eating. Days later, Goodall again observed chimpanzees breaking small branches and stripping leaves to fish for termites. This was food modification and primitive tool-making behavior. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. All along, people believed only humans used and made tools, considering tool-making the hallmark distinguishing humans from animals. Goodall telegraphed Leakey about her observations. He replied, "Ah, now we must redefine man, redefine tools, or admit chimpanzees are human." This observation caused huge ripples in the scientific community.
Some claimed Goodall's lack of professional training made reliable information unlikely.
Other scientists implied Goodall had taught the chimpanzees to fish for termites. Regardless, this discovery secured Goodall funding from the National Geographic Society. Goodall also discovered chimpanzees had distinct personalities and named them. Mr. McGregor was a combative, bald chimpanzee with a long face. William looked perpetually gloomy. Ollie was timid. His daughter Gilka resembled a little elf. And David Graybeard. David was among the first chimpanzees to accept Goodall, helping her gain others' trust. David had a close friend named Goliath, after the biblical giant. However, chimpanzee Goliath wasn't exceptionally large. He was remarkably bold and served as the alpha male of the Kasakela group. Back then, Goodall didn't realize naming chimpanzees was frowned upon by mainstream science. She should have used numbers, and describing personalities was also considered improper. And, you know, because the scientific community believed only humans had personalities and emotions, but the longer Goodall spent with chimpanzees, the more convinced she became of their similarities to humans. They could reason and plan. For example, a chimpanzee would sit down, look around, and deliberately scratch itself. Then it would pick a blade of grass and quietly walk to a termite mound hidden from other chimpanzees. She also discovered chimpanzees modified objects into tools, like crumpling leaves into sponges to absorb water. Moreover, chimpanzees kiss, hug, hold hands, and more with each other. They care for family and friends, but also hold grudges intensely. Some grudges lasted over a week. What impressed Goodall most was David Graybeard. David sometimes allowed Goodall to follow him. One day, David left the path into riverside bushes. When Goodall got tangled in vines and thought she'd lost him, David waited by the water. She approached, picked up a fallen oil palm nut, placed the nut in her palm, and offered it to David. David looked at Goodall, took the nut, then dropped it. Then he softly squeezed her hand. 40 years later, Goodall still recalled that moment, deeply moved. She knew David understood her intention. In 1965, Goodall earned her PhD in ethology from Cambridge University. She became the 8th person at Cambridge to receive a doctorate without prior university credentials. 8 years later, she became an associate professor at Stanford. Personally, new changes unfolded too. In 1964, she married Dutch filmmaker Hugo van Lawick, sent by National Geographic to document Gombe's chimps. They co-founded a research station and set up a banana feeding station. David brought companions for treats while Hugo filmed, securing more funding. In 1967, their son Grub was born. Motherhood deepened Goodall's empathy for chimpanzee maternal behavior. Conversely, she also learned parenting skills from observing chimpanzees. She found that a chimpanzee mother's personality and her relationships with offspring and group members were crucial. For instance, Flo was a loving, patient mother whose children grew up with harmonious relationships. Whereas another female, Passion, was stricter and less attentive, resulting in more reserved offspring. However, due to frequent separations and disagreements on certain matters, in 1974, Goodall divorced her husband, Hugo. The following year, she married Derek Bryceson, who held positions including Tanzania's agriculture minister, health minister, and director of national parks. Additionally, two incidents in 1970s Gombe deeply shocked Goodall. First was the kidnapping of students from the research camp. One night in May 1975, over 40 terrorists crossed Lake Tanganyika from modern Congo in small boats, abducting 3 American and 1 Dutch student. Kidnappers demanded ransom and weapons. Hostages were released after U.S. and Dutch payments. This made Gombe a sensitive zone, requiring special government permits for researchers. Without her husband Derek's political influence, Goodall's research might have ended. The second incident stemmed from Goodall's discovery of chimpanzee cannibalism. Since 1971, researchers observed multiple violent attacks among chimpanzees. Some targeted group members. In 1975, female Passion and her daughter attacked another female, Gilka's infant, killing and eating it. Gilka, disabled by polio, couldn't fight back. Goodall suspected Passion also killed Gilka's first and third infants. Other attacks targeted chimpanzees from different groups. Once, a female with offspring was surrounded by males patrolling territory borders. She responded with submissive gestures. Whimpering, she pressed against a tree trunk and humbly tried touching one male. But that male chimpanzee suddenly moved away and vigorously wiped the spot on his arm where the female had touched him with leaves. A few minutes later, the group of males brutally attacked, severely injuring the female, and her child was killed. From 1974 to 1977, a bloody 4-year war erupted among the chimpanzees in Gombe. The chimpanzee group that Goodall had been tracking and studying was called the Kasakela community. Around 1972, 7 male chimpanzees and 3 females, with offspring from Kasakela, formed a new independent group called Kahama in the southern part of the original territory, preventing Kasakela chimpanzees from accessing the southern forests.
When these two groups met at the border, they would threaten each other, and conflicts escalated.
In 1974, a researcher witnessed a severe violent attack by Kasakela chimpanzees against Kahama chimpanzees. 6 Kasakela male chimpanzees quietly reached their southern boundary and encountered Golly, a male from Kahama, eating. Golly noticed the enemies approaching, immediately fled, but was caught. The Kasakela chimpanzees pinned Golly to the ground, beating him for a full 10 minutes before leaving. Later, researchers never saw Golly again. He was presumed dead. This event marked the beginning of the 4-year war. The war resulted in the complete annihilation of the southern Kahama group, with victims often suffering brutal attacks lasting 10 to 20 minutes. Only 3 young females without offspring survived and were taken by the victorious males. These 4 years were the darkest in Gombe's history, greatly shocking Goodall. At the beginning of her research, she saw how these primates cared for and helped each other, but now she discovered that our close relatives, like us, have a dark side to their nature. She also found that some males, especially young ones, find violent behavior exciting. They would sneak into enemy territory to observe their foes. This dangerous curiosity. Clearly, humans also have the same group mentality. Chimpanzees have a strong group identity, treating members and strangers differently.
One such brutal attack, driven by us versus them mentality, happened to Goliath.
Goliath was once the alpha male of the Kasakela group, but by the 1970s, he had become old and frail, posing no threat at all. Goodall didn't know why he followed the southern Kahama group. When Goliath encountered the Kasakela chimpanzees, he hid in the bushes but was dragged out by 5 adult males who were once his close companions.
Goliath screamed loudly, while a juvenile Kasakela chimpanzee charged and hidden, calling out excitedly. The attack lasted 18 minutes. They beat and bit him, even twisting one of his legs. Ah!
After the mob left, Goliath struggled to sit up but failed. Goodall and the researchers searched for Goliath for a week, but never saw him again. In her book, Goodall wrote that the attack methods used by Kasakala chimpanzees against Kahama chimpanzees never appeared in internal group fights. But when chimpanzees deal with large prey, these methods are common and can incapacitate the prey, even dismember it. Once, a chimpanzee even drank the blood of the attacked individual, similar to how humans dehumanize others when committing violence against their own kind. The Kasakela chimpanzees completely de-chimpanzed their enemies. When Goodall published first-hand accounts of Gombe chimpanzees killing each other, she faced criticism from peers again, but some said it was fabricated by Goodall, while others argued that the aggressive behavior stemmed from the banana feeding station she set up. In this book, Goodall notes that such criticism isn't without reason, but she also points out that scientists have observed similar territorial attacks elsewhere in Africa. Other scientists, while acknowledging the violence among chimpanzees, believed Goodall shouldn't have made this public, not for scientific reasons, but political ones. A peer told Goodall that this observation would be used by irresponsible scientists and writers to prove that humans are inherently violent, so war is inevitable. These voices were related to the era's context. It was the 1970s. People were still living in the aftermath of World War II, debating whether aggression is inherent to human nature or a result of nurture. Goodall's research results undoubtedly fuel this debate. But for her work is simply to understand chimpanzees. If chimpanzees show us the dark side of humanity, can we also learn from them where love comes from? In fact, in most cases, love, not violence, is the main theme in a chimpanzee community. They hug each other, reach out to touch when scared or excited, and sometimes even kiss. Chimpanzees not only have strong family bonds but also help unrelated individuals, even sacrificing themselves. Goodall believes this care and mutual aid evolved and are rooted in chimpanzees' genetic makeup. Moreover, chimpanzees know how to resolve conflicts when tensions rise. If two fight, the victim often approaches the aggressor with a submissive gesture, like crawling on the ground or reaching out pleadingly. And the aggressor usually pats or even kisses and hugs the victim. Then it's over. In a Dutch zoo, there's an old female chimpanzee who's particularly good at mediating. When two adult males conflict and sit apart, avoiding eye contact, this female will groom one first. While grooming, she moves closer to the other male, and the one being groomed follows. Then she leaves the first and grooms the second, repeating the movement. Finally, when the two males are close enough to be groomed simultaneously, she quietly leaves. By then, both males have calmed down and start grooming each other. Conflict resolved, and they're still good brothers. These cases make Goodall think. If chimpanzees can control their aggressive instincts and resolve conflicts, so can we humans. And as more intelligent beings, our altruism and self-sacrifice are even greater than theirs. In 1980, Goodall's second husband, Derek, died of cancer. She stayed with him in England during his final days. Afterwards, she returned to Gombe Forest and the chimpanzees. Healing herself, she was with the chimpanzees. Goodall often felt relaxed and serene, becoming one with nature, becoming one with it. All human emotions seem insignificant in the natural world, yet somehow elevated. Many scientists are atheists who revere reason and logic. Unlike them, Goodall believed both in evolution and God. She deeply believed in a spiritual force, whether called God, Brahman, or other divine names, which might sound contradictory. But Goodall argued, whether we evolved or were created matters less than our future choices. Will we keep harming each other and nature? Can we find harmony with Earth's life? These are humanity's crucial questions. Now, part 3 explores how Goodall shifted focus to environmental conservation and education. In 1986, Goodall published The Chimpanzees of Gombe. Chicago's Academy of Sciences held a conference celebrating its release, addressing conservation. In the early 20th century, chimpanzee populations exceeded 2 million.
By late century, that number had dropped below 1.5 million.
Population growth drove deforestation, eroding chimpanzee habitats. Many groups shrank too small to avoid inbreeding. Additionally, commercial hunting thrived. Chimps were butchered for bushmeat, mothers killed to sell infants as pets or to medical labs.
Lab chimpanzees lived in half-meter cages, subjected to hepatitis and AIDS experiments.
Learning this, Goodall began tirelessly campaigning. Her Jane Goodall Institute supports African chimp and wildlife research and improves captive animal welfare. In 1991, she founded Roots and Shoots, an environmental education program for youth. Some argued Goodall should help Africans, not just animals, but for her, this wasn't an either-or choice. She established several wildlife sanctuaries in Africa, actively involving locals by hiring them and purchasing their produce. This indirectly stimulated local economic development. Additionally, sanctuaries can develop tourism programs like those in Kenya and Uganda, which later became self-sustaining. Regarding lab animals, Goodall acknowledged animal testing remains unavoidable for now, but we should minimize unnecessary suffering for these animals. Through Goodall and other advocates' efforts, lab animal conditions have improved. Many U.S. vet schools stopped using healthy stray cats and dogs for experiments, and some labs enlarged chimpanzee cages. In 1995, for her chimpanzee research and environmental education, Goodall was named a Dame of the British Empire by Queen Elizabeth II. In 2002, she was also designated a UN Messenger of Peace. During global lectures, people often ask, Goodall, do you think there's still hope for our world? Is there hope for the next generation? Goodall remains optimistic, believing human ingenuity can develop technologies that meet our needs while protecting the environment. If we give nature a chance, it demonstrates remarkable resilience. For example, the heavily polluted Lower Thames River once had nearly extinct aquatic life. After large-scale restoration, fish and birds returned. Crucially, growing environmental awareness fuels conservation efforts. This is our hope. She writes, time is running out. Tomorrow's world needs us to save it. You and I must ignite the spark. This concludes our interpretation of this book. Reading notes are below the audio. Until next time.